Hi, I'm Bill Wilder, Executive Director at Lifecycle Engineering, and I'm delighted to have Ron Moore with me today to chat with us a little bit about his work in the area of operational excellence. So Ron, I know that Making Common Sense Common Practice was maybe not your first book, but there's the one you're so well known for. Tell me about when you actually published that and how that came about.
Well, it was the first book, and the publication was in 1999. So it's been around now for 20 years. Yeah. And it came about because I wanted to tell a story, really, about how people achieve operational excellence and how they can just use at least what appears to be common sense in addressing that.
So here we are some 20 years later.
Yep.
Are people making common sense common practice?
Well, not nearly as much as they should be, you know. It's still a bit of a struggle. I've seen quite a bit of progress over the past 20 years. People aren't as reactive. They're at least aware of some of these principles and practices, okay, and they are working hard to apply them. But most of them have a long way to go.
Okay. Okay, but you've seen progress in terms of people being aware that there's an opportunity in their business to focus some attention. And when we say operational excellence, what are we talking about? What do we mean?
Well, we're not just talking about maintenance for sure, and reliability is kind of the foundation of operational excellence. And reliability has to do with having good design, good procurement, good operations, and good maintenance. And those three functions have to work collectively to a common purpose so that they achieve operational excellence. And too often we find these folks operating in silos where they're doing their thing. Mm-hmm. The design guys are worried about cost and schedule, not so much about what happens 5 years from now. Procurement guys are worried about low cost or low price, really, not total cost of ownership. Right. And the operating guys are worried about, of course, producing a quality product on time. But if that interferes with taking care of the assets, they're going to produce the product first. But long term, that's not good for the business. So it has to do with all those organizations working together to achieve a common purpose and balancing all those conflicting and competing interests.
So people are more aware, but they still have the silos and they still have these issues with the various functions and they're optimizing their performance, right?
Yep.
So with this new awareness, though, where do people start? I mean, how do they get engaged, and what do they need to do first?
Well, it's kind of a complex question. To some extent, it depends on where they are. Okay. If they are really crappy, then just start. It's a target-rich environment, and so about anything you do will help you get better. Right. But what I've found is that there are really 4 primary elements in achieving so-called operational excellence. And the first one, of course, is leadership.
Okay. Leadership.
And by that, I don't mean so much, somebody on high has proclaimed something. What I mean is active sponsorship. Okay. They're actively engaged in reliability and operational excellence, much the same as they would be for safety.
Okay.
Right? If they would just do the same things they do to support safety, they would get better reliability, and they get better safety, and they get lower costs, and they get better environmental performance. Okay. So it's a combination of all those things. But the second thing is having a good production and maintenance partnership, where you're working together to a common purpose, and it's production-led. Production is king. Well, production is king. But it has to recognize the value that maintenance contributes to this. The third thing is when they have some shared measures so that it facilitates collaboration amongst the functional groups. And for example, I would hold production responsible for maintenance schedule compliance and maintenance and repair costs, because most of the defects that create the failures are usually caused by poor operating practice, right?
Right.
But by the same token, I'd hold maintenance responsible for on-time delivery.
Right.
So that when they want to do maintenance and it affects delivery, they have to come to some
Right.
common agreement with the production guys about what makes sense in that circumstance.
Okay.
So, and the last thing, of course, is the shop floor engagement process. The leverage is in getting hundreds of people working every day to make things a tiny bit better.
Right.
And most people are not particularly engaged according to the data. So you need structured improvement time. If you want to understand the problems with the work, talk to the workers.
Go down and talk to them.
Talk to
right?
them.
Okay.
Yeah, ask them.
Good.
So,
Good. Good.
yep.
So get a sponsor.
Yep,
So you got somebody high in the organization as authority to,
Right.
to engage in this and create awareness.
yep,
Create partnerships across the silos
yep,
with shared metrics,
yep,
and then engage the people.
right.
So it's a
Sounds
big
simple.
component. Well, it does, but that
It's-
whole people part is the hardest part, right?
Right,
It's
yeah.
getting the sponsor to stay engaged through the process,
Yep.
and then to get the people doing the work engaged and inspired to change their behavior.
Right, yeah.
I don't know your experience, but ours would suggest that that's the challenge most people have, right? So when people fail, for example, why do they fail?
Yeah. Well, it is, but if you have structured improvement time that allows them to come and make the improvements, and this structured improvement time is facilitated by somebody who understands problem solving and the various tools,
Right.
then the people who are creating the solutions will own the solutions because they have a sense of purpose, a sense of control, and of course a sense of ownership. And it's not just being imposed upon them, they're actually participating,
All right.
and then they actually enjoy that.
That's a big part of it, right? Participating.
Right.
Instead of having it been done to you,
Right.
you do it, right?
Yep.
So you mentioned safety and environmental, but what are some of the other reasons why someone would want to even embark on this journey, right? So if I'm a corporate level engineering person, or maybe a VP of ops or engineering. Why would I be interested in this? What is it going to achieve for me and for the organization?
Well, share price is important to you, I'm assuming,
There
if
you
you're at
go.
an executive
Okay.
level. And of course, if you can improve your operating practices, you get lower costs, you get higher gross profits, you have more to invest in the future product development and capital
Yep.
projects. And you can do all that such that you actually make more money. And of course, making more money drives your share price up.
Pretty much,
Yeah,
especially in a public company, that's what
Right.
it's all about,
Yeah.
month to month.
right. And you
Right.
get better cash flow and so on.
Sure,
So,
right,
yeah.
right.
So it's you get all the normal benefits that you expect in a business, increased profits, increased market share, happier employees, better safety, better environmental
Right.
performance. You get all the above,
Yeah, so it's that whole triple bottom line some people talk about, right? So you get the financial performance, the people engagement, the social responsibility, environmental safety, et cetera, right?
right?
So 20 years, we've been talking about this. Now, 20 years ago, I don't think IoT had been coined. I don't think we were using that term. There might have been somebody talking about augmented reality.
the internet didn't
The internet maybe a
hardly
little
exist.
bit, right?
Yeah.
But you didn't have people running around with sensors, wireless sensors all over their equipment with tablets that are collecting stuff in real time. I mean, it's been transformed by this. How does that impact operational excellence initiatives?
Well, I think it will add to the ability of people to have better data, to do better analyses, and so on. The concern I have is it may reduce the amount of engagement. You see
Right.
people walking down the street with their nose in their cell phone. It just irritates me.
Right.
Rather than, what's the right word? I think social media is anti-social media. And so I think it's real important to be careful that all this IoT stuff doesn't drag you into a screen and you forget about all the human interactions that's necessary in order to engage people
Right.
and to provide the sponsorship and to have the communication and achieving the common goals. So they're wonderful tools. I would just advise some caution about the
Right.
fact that they're not a magic wand.
So there's that people aspect, right? That connection with the people and people engagement. What are some of the other considerations? If I've got vendors telling me I need to buy these sensors and that sensor, I need to collect more data when I already got more data than I know what to do with, but so that I can be making decisions in real time. What are some of the foundational things you would think that would need to be in place for me to be able to take advantage of that technology? I surprised you with that one, didn't
You did. So
you
I
can
wa-
think about it a minute.
so I wasn't ready for it. Well, I'd just go back to what I said earlier. The foundational elements are sponsorship, production
Okay.
maintenance partnership, shared performance measures, and a process for engaging
Funny how that didn't
employees.
change, did it?
No,
It's still the same thing, so don't forget the basics.
yeah.
Right?
I mean, those are fun.
I mean, that's blocking and tackling kind of stuff.
Right.
Right? So if you don't have that,
Yeah.
you can go buy all the technology you want. It's probably going to make it worse.
Well, the technology is important, but
Yeah.
recognize that the tools are just that, a tool.
A tool.
You know, the analogy I use is, people say you've got to have a computerized maintenance management system. Well, yeah, you do, but thinking that you're going to buy one of those and suddenly things are going to be better is kind of like thinking you're going to buy Word from Microsoft and suddenly you'll have a novel, right? It
Right,
takes a
right.
lot of work to create a novel.
Right.
And
You might be able to do it faster
yeah.
or better.
So the CMMS is a tool that then you have to populate, you have to train
Right.
people, you have to, put the databases in, you have to link it over to accounting. I mean, there's an incredible amount of work. It's a tool.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's not necessarily a solution until you engage the tool properly.
Right, okay. So you need to start with that,
Yeah,
I guess, discipline
yeah.
around the way you do your work and your data and
Right.
so forth.
And have
be
some
very
common
targeted.
goals that align the workforce to some, overriding objective.
Right.
What Edgar Schein calls superordinate goals.
Mm-hmm.
What's the overall goal of this organization? What are we trying to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
And then hammer that day
Right,
in and
link
day
that
out.
to all this
Yeah.
daily activity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So people call you all the time. I mean, you're a well-known authority on this. What are the kind of questions that, when you get calls from corporations or facilities or organizations, what kind of questions are they asking you?
Well, I suppose the questions vary, but the fundamental question is, we're not very good. How do we get better?
Okay. And then you say,
Well, first thing I want to know is where are they?
okay,
Right?
so
You gotta
assess the
start
current
with where are
state,
you?
whatever, right?
And some of the questions I ask are, well, for example, what's your overall equipment effectiveness or your asset utilization?
Okay.
And typical numbers you see there for, say, a discrete plant, like automotive or food, would be 60%.
Okay.
So they're pretty ordinary.
Yeah.
They're not horrible.
Right.
They're not good. They're just about average.
Right.
In a process plant, it might be closer to 75, 80%.
Okay.
They're not great. They're just ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells me, in terms of net performance, where they are.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to know is, what about your level of reactive maintenance?
Well,
Right?
okay.
Because
right.
if you're highly reactive, that tells me that you got a lot of opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that also, it's not because, necessarily that people don't know what to do. They just don't have the systems in place that allow them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, if you're highly reactive, generally you're less safe. Right?
Right.
And so I want to know about their safety data, and also want to know, about their just a general, feeling or impression of their cooperative relationships. Do production and maintenance work together? Do stores and maintenance work together? Are they at odds a lot?
Okay.
So
Right.
just to get a general feel for how well people
Or
are
they're
working
there.
together.
Right.
Right.
They're like this or like this.
Yeah.
Right.
And so those are some of the general questions I want to ask. And I'll, ask about the size of the workforce and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives me a kind of an image of where they are. And then I like to go see them,
Okay.
walk
Right.
through the plant.
Yep.
One of the things I do when I walk through an operation is I count the number of people working, right? And the number of people that are not working,
Not working.
right?
Right.
The people that are sitting around, the people that are walking back and forth, the people that are not occupied in productive, work. Typical numbers around 3 out of 10.
Are working?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, 3 out of 10.
Okay.
And that
That's not
really,
good.
No, not particularly good. But, a really good number would be like 5 or 6.
Right.
Because there are meetings, right?
Sure.
You do have to
Right.
get back and forth
Sure.
to job location.
At least half of them.
You do take breaks,
Right.
so that's okay.
Yeah.
And so that 3 also corresponds to what Bob Kelleher calls the level of engagement of the workforce.
Right.
30% are typically engaged,
Engaged.
right?
Yeah.
50% are sightseeing, and 20% are, trying to do negative
Taking
things.
you backwards. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a good place to start, is to
Yeah.
understand
And
not just the processes and those things you talked about, but the level of engagement
Right.
of the people.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be, as you said, that's the 4th piece that you
Yeah.
better have, or
Right.
he's not going anywhere.
And I also look at housekeeping.
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
Do
Right.
they have, measures and charts, and do they seem
Mhm.
organized and disciplined? Do they have
Right.
shift handover? Is the place tidy and clean and looked after? Does it look like it's cared for? And so if not very many people are working and it doesn't look very cared for, and they're highly reactive and so on and so forth, they're not so good.
So what drives that? I mean, is it documented practices? Is it some kind of way that you
No, it's
communicate
leadership.
with people? Okay, it's leadership. And
Leadership,
so what do we even
leadership,
say
leadership.
leadership? What do we mean? I mean, because everybody says leadership, right? So what does that mean?
Well, it means that the leadership is actively engaged in helping people get better. They're
So they're out there they come out on the floor, they talk
yeah,
to
they
people,
go out and talk
they
to
go see
people.
what's going
They
on.
talk to their people and
Right.
advise them of what's expected. They go out on the floor and find out what's going
Right.
on. They're, I said it earlier, they're active sponsors
Mhm.
for operational excellence. They're not just sitting in their office issuing decrees.
Right.
They're actively engaged with not just their staff, but with the workforce.
So if the organization calls you and you do your assessment, you see some opportunity there, that means there's someone who is championing this. Where do you typically see that in an organization?
Well, at the site, it would be the site manager.
Okay, so the general manager or the
Yeah.
plant manager or the site manager that's over that site has
They have the
for
leadership
whatever reason,
responsibility
they've
to do those
sensed.
things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're like the ones that would be the champion behind this, and then they would assign people in the engineering
Yeah.
group or put together a team or something.
Well, they
How do you
put
see
together a
approach
team,
typically?
but they would set the expectation that, that you're going to have a production and maintenance partnership. You're going to have shared measures.
Right.
There is going to be an engagement process.
Right.
At times, you need some external resources, some external
right.
folks, like
Right.
life cycle engineering, to come in and help you put the processes in place.
Right.
Okay, and that's very helpful, I think, because Deming said a system cannot know itself. Profound knowledge comes from the outside by invitation. And so if you're paying somebody to help you, you're more likely to listen than if Joe Schmo down the hall tells you something.
Right.
Right? You're not paying him. Well, you are, but you're not personally paying him. So when you have money in it, you're more likely to pay attention. And if you get a good support group from outside, it would it'd be beneficial to you.
So the ones that you've seen successful usually engage at some level of
External support.
if nothing else, just in terms of looking at the system and giving you some insights, some profound knowledge about that system itself, because it's just impossible to do it internally.
Right.
Because you have all the other things going on.
Right.
Okay.
Now, that's not always the case, but
Sure.
in the cases where I've seen it be most successful, there is some sort of external influence to provide a guiding light
Yeah.
and to help correct
Right.
things when you go a little off course.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, all right. So that's you have other books. What other books do you have out there now that?
Well, there's a book, What Tool When,
Okay.
a management guide for selecting the right improvement tools.
Okay.
And the summary of that is, if you have good leadership, good alignment, good teamwork, it doesn't matter what tool you pick.
Okay.
If you don't have that, it
Doesn't matter
what
what tool you pick.
right?
You're still going to get the
Yeah.
results, right?
But,
Okay.
but fundamentally, though, if you start out with the basics, things like 5S, 5Y, standard work, things that engage the workforce.
Yeah.
That creates the organizational discipline, the readiness.
Right.
Then you go to things like TPM, OEE, operator care, PM, PDM, and so on,
Right.
planning and scheduling. And then you go to
Right.
Six Sigma, RCM, and so on. And I found that model works best. If you start at the bottom, you don't have the organizational readiness.
Right.
Not only that, but RCA and RCM generally only involve about 3 or 4% of the workforce.
Right.
What about the other
about the rest of
96%?
Yeah. Right.
You know,
Right.
who could be helping you get a little better,
Better. Right. So look at that whole engaging everyone
right?
at some level in whatever the right place is.
Yep.
All right. And then you have another book coming on.
Well, I've got
Coming up.
several books. Where do we start our improvement program? Takes you through a model of identifying where the major opportunities are, where the money is,
Oh, okay.
and the quickest wins.
Right. Right. How to justify it in terms of that
Right. Yep.
that money number we talked about earlier.
And then there's business fables and foibles.
Ah, okay.
It's a story about all the screw-ups I've seen companies make, and it's told in a very lighthearted manner.
There's a lot of learning from
Yeah,
our
right.
mistakes, right?
Yeah, it's a beach read.
Right. There you go. Okay.
It's 35 short stories,
Oh,
with
nice.
a lesson at the end of each
Right,
short
okay.
story. And the next one coming out is a common sense approach to defect elimination.
oh, okay.
So, yeah, it'll be out in May. I
So
think.
that's pretty specific,
Yeah.
a little more targeted at a very specific type of activity.
Yep.
Right.
Well, we start out talking about common sense.
Right.
It's not that common. And why not? Well,
Why isn't it? That's good. Why isn't common sense common?
Well, because people all have different personalities, different value systems, different
Right.
experiences, and so on. And what's common sense to me may not be common sense to you. And so the real important part there is to get that overriding objective purpose alignment, so that you
Right.
make it more common.
Right.
you know.
Right.
And then I talk about what's a defect. It's any imperfection, and how do you get started. And then a whole series of case studies on applying those principles.
Yeah.
So that'll be out
Yeah.
soon in May.
Yeah. That'd be it's super handy for doing that engagement piece and
Right.
defining where you can create some real opportunity and quick
Yeah.
wins. If
And
you will.
hopefully demonstrating to leadership how they create a sense of common
sense.
Right.
Well, you've been a good friend to Life Cycle for many years, and we've very much appreciated your guidance. And most of the folks we've worked with and that we've engaged you in have been better off for it. So that's one of our key mantras. So from our point of view,
Yeah. I'm glad to hear it.
the fact that you help people be better and have demonstrated that for decades is definitely worth a Lifetime Achievement Award. So thank you.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right.